Welcome to the Company of Dads podcast, where we explore the sweet, silly, strange, and sublime aspects of being a lead dad in a world where men, who are the go-to parent, aren't always accepted at work, among their friends, or in the community for what they're doing. I'm your host, Paul Sullivan. Our podcast is just one of the many things we produce each week at the Company of Dads. We have various features, including the Lead Dad of the Week. We have our monthly meetups. We have a resource library for all fathers. The one-stop shop for all of this is our newsletter, The Dad. So sign up today at thecompanyofdads.com/thedad. Today, our guest is Neal Conlon. He's one interesting guy. I mean, for those of you watching this, you can see the beard and be impressed. But he's much more than cool facial hair. Out of high school, he went into the Marines, where he served for nearly 8 years. Getting out, he chased status, as he now admits, at well-known global companies. Then he hit reset. He's had success being an entrepreneur, raising capital, and helping lead growth companies. But we're here today to talk through his work with men. He runs Omni's Rising, a community to support men, and Press Forward Coaching to help men get past the obstacles in their lives. He's also the father of 3. Welcome, Neal, to the Company of Dads podcast.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. Really excited to do this with you.
Awesome. When you think about, the problems that men typically come to you, if you had a list of like the top 3, top 5 problems that men struggle with and that you help them solve, what would be on that list?
I think top 3, top 5, I would say I'm stuck, don't know what to do next, overwhelmed, there's probably some underlying numbing agent, and I'll call that alcohol, tobacco, porn, something like that. Or I think I'm going to get fired. The company's changing. Like, I'm not doing a good job. And those are the big ones.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because there's a big piece of the work that I do around kind of the blueprint that we're all following. We all have this kind of blueprint. And if I was going to package that all up into one thing, it really is that we probably weren't taught well how to ask for support and help when we didn't know what to do next, versus like it's kind of ingrained in us at a very early age that I'm fine, I'm good, I'll figure it out. And then by the time that wave has kind of crested, and now you can actually see that it's going to fall apart on you, men, especially dads, kind of go into this space of like, by the time they're asking for help, they're already on this like slalom down to a pain point.
Yeah, and that's when you gave me the big issues. I mean, it seems like people are coming to you in an extremist situation. Like they've already gotten to the point where if you're worried about losing your job, if you're numbing yourself, it's been a while since the problem presented itself. And so these are not small, problems to solve. Like, do I have broccoli or green beans with dinner? What's better for me? You can solve that in a second. So when they come to you with these big problems, what does a solution look like? What does the process look like? And, and we're all impatient. We've become even more impatient because of social media. How, long does it typically take for you to help a guy get unstuck and get back to what he wants to be, or become a different version of who he wants to be?
Yeah. It's interesting because I came, those companies that I worked for in the big corporate side, right, we're always very solution focused.
Yeah.
Right. So person comes to you with a problem, financial services, banking, real estate. I want this thing to happen, and we would craft and create solutions. And fundamentally, what's interesting about those things that I mentioned to you, those are 99% of the time, those are never the problems. And that's the thing, is like what led me into coaching was the fact that, I think that while there's dozens of kinds of coaching, like categories and niches, there really only is 2 types of coaching. There is business coaching, which is I don't know how to run a business, so then I'm going to teach you how to run a P&L, teach you how to do sales, teach you how to do operations, and then you should go off and be able to do the thing. Yeah. And everything else what I've learned over the years of doing this boils down to a mindset and getting new tools and new systems in place in order to do that. And so when I first started coaching several years ago, I was very solutions focused. So someone showed up, I've got a porn problem, I've got an alcohol problem, I've got a relationship problem. It was, well, go do this, and go do this. And I learned very quickly that if it was that easy for people, they would be doing that on their own, right? It's interesting now because I think the tables are really turning. And if someone comes to me now and says, I'm stuck, I don't know what to do next, or my relationship is, falling apart, or I don't know how to, my kids are evolving either into little humans from babies, or maybe even evolving into teenage self-supporting years. And those are two interesting areas where people get real uncomfortable because their identity around that has to change a little bit. And I walk people through this process and I say, well, how much water are you drinking? How's your diet? Um, how's your social circle? How's your sex life? And how much sleep are you getting? Those 5 things.
Yeah.
And I always tell people every single time I talk to somebody now, go work on those 5 things for 2 weeks and then come back to me and then tell me what the problem really is.
Mm.
And it's wild that we live in a world where most people can't do those things for 14 days.
Mm.
And it's a big piece of, I think, that there's dads who are living in 2024 with a 1984 blueprint of what they should be doing. And so the tools and systems that they have in place today do not fit the environment that we operate in today at all. And they're just getting mad and frustrated because they're trying to use like a Phillips head screwdriver on a flathead screw and then wondering why it doesn't work.
It's so good. I mean, when you think about it, what the underlying problem is, I think, a lot of guys, as we get older, we go to PT and you get a good PT and you have a pain in wherever, and he'll tweak something else that's nowhere near it. And that relieves that pain. When you think about your own life, you talk about most things are solutions focused, in not necessarily in a positive way, but being in the Marines, there's a solution. You're being, planning plans to train for combat, and then going into sales. Sales is you're providing a solution, whatever it is that you're selling. How did you yourself, shift your mindset from being always looking for the solution for, your fellow Marines, to the people you're selling to people on your team? How did you shift your own mindset and to have it be, something other than solutions focused, as when you said, I said in the intro, when you hit that reset and start to think differently about yourself as a man and a dad?
Yeah, I love this question. So thank you for asking it. I think one of the callings I have kind of in this world now is not to let other, especially dads, suffer the way I let myself suffer for a bunch of years. Like, I was just a masochist for a bunch of years in the fact of I just thought I could do it all myself. I just really so I grew up without a father figure present in my life. I had really, really great grandfathers on both sides of my family. And so they gave me these like strong values and ethics. Like, it's really interesting when I unpack that sometimes, because neither one of them ever stepped in and played the father figure role, but they gave me that strong family value and moral ethics. But there was like this missing piece about like understanding like how people actually get to be successful in any way, shape, or form. And so I kind of went off on this like, pilgrimage of becoming a Marine. And in the Marine Corps, the ethos is so clear. Everyone is so banded together. I mean, like you're lock in step with each other. And then my transition out of that was super, super hard. And then I was like, I'm just going to figure it out myself. And I was afraid to be seen as a person who didn't understand what they were doing. And I think that's a big piece of it. Is I went like 12 years thinking I knew what I was doing, when really I was running by the seat of my pants, figuring out how to be a father, when I didn't have a good father figure. Then it's a matter of understanding what a healthy fatherhood looks like for children, let alone just having one in place at all. And it spun me. I spun myself for like 8 to 10 years, where I just kept on trying to, like, it was like almost like having a flint and steel and like trying to get the fire going.
Yeah.
And I kept on getting the fire going, and it would rage out of control, and I have to put it out myself and do it again and do it again. And really, it was just like a matter of, um, on my like third, third, as my third relationship, because I've got three children with three different parents, three different mothers. I just had to have this like real rough circumstance where I was like, what do I keep doing wrong here?
Right.
Like, and there was no one else to, like, I think the big thing
Maybe it's
is
not
like,
them. Maybe it's me. Type thing.
maybe it's me.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of empathy on the other side of that now, that it shouldn't have taken me that many tries to get to that place, but I didn't have enough examples of like healthy men and trusted partners and friends. And now I just believe like all these like little cool meme statements that we hear, like, it takes a village, to raise a child, is a good one. But then the flip side of that is like, every kid deserves to have a village. Like, you deserve
Right.
to have as many people, men, women, love on them as possible. And we live in this world now where everybody's got like this weird like pushback right away from anything that doesn't feel like very clear. And we've lost this idea. Well, I'll say it this way. It took me a long time to really embrace this, is that I think everything in my life got a lot better in this context when I realized that everything happens at the speed of trust.
Mm. Yep.
And when I started to trust myself first, and then trust others to be vulnerable enough to ask for support and to go out of my way to ask for things, that's when it really started to flip.
You said, it shouldn't have taken you as many times as it did, but of course you were trying. So you get credit for trying. What was it in that time when you really were able to hit reset? What was it that, you got to that moment where you tried different ways that hadn't quite worked out, and then you tried the thing that clicked and set you on the path? What was different about that moment as compared to the previous ones?
I'll be super transparent about it, because I talk about it openly with my daughter's mother. I had been about probably 6 years into the marriage, and had gotten this like personal development bug. Right, I was like, Gary Vaynerchuk was coming out with his first book, and all these different people were starting to evolve, and I was like in the Inc. 5000 community because of a business that I was part of. And I was just going to these different things, and people were just like opening up these things for me about new concepts around growth mindset and stuff like that. And I started to like just really have this moment where I'd come home to my then partner, and I'd be like, this whole world just opened up to me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't being received well at that time.
The whole new world that was opening, it was not being received well by your then
by my then partner.
Yeah. Okay.
And I felt this like immense loneliness, where like, and that really like went on for a couple of months. And then it really was like, I really had to like, that's where like my radical acceptance really started to happen. And then it led me down this path of like, I call it a pilgrimage, because that's really what it was, where I started learning how to meditate. And then I've been to some plant medicine ceremonies in the jungles, and did all these different things. And then little by little, it was like these little things started to unlock for me. But the big moment really was, it was like really sitting with myself and having radical acceptance to be like, all right, number one, I'm not happy where I am. Like, I clearly am not happy where I am. And it's nobody else's fault but my own. Like that was really a huge thing for me.
Yeah. You have 3 kids. What are the ages of your kids right now?
21, 16, and 12.
21, 16, and 12. And look, I look at I have 3 daughters. My wife, I'm married, to 20 years. So different in that sense, but not so different in that there are 3 different kids. There's a different version of me with each one, different, for, different level of experience. When you think about the father that you've been to each of those 3 kids, what does that evolution look like, for you as a father to those 3 kids? And how do you talk to them about it, particularly the older ones?
Well, what's interesting about that is, I think it's one of the superpowers I've developed over time about how I really help men, especially fathers, through these circumstances because um, I've been the uh, I've been the son of an absentee father. I've had a stepfather. Um, I've been the stepfather. I've been the absentee father. I've been the present father. Like I've literally been every
Yeah.
genre of fatherhood except for the grandfather, which will be coming, years down the road. Like every single angle that of a father, I've been the shitty dad, I've been the good dad, I've been like, and my oldest son, who's 21, who just got engaged, who I'm very very grateful he shared that with me. Um, I didn't see him for 14 years, and so when he was 4, and I'm in such a healthy place about these topics and helping others through them that I can talk about them actively
Yeah.
and not from a place of like this happened to me, but from a place of like this is where I was in my life. And so when he was 4, it was a very very hard divorce going on, very painful court systems, interstate things, very very painful thing. And having been through that when I was growing up, I made the executive decision of my family to sign away my parental rights because I thought there was something inside of me at that point that said, this is the best thing for him versus this is the dad I want to be. And the crazy thing is that 18 years old, he reached out to me. He said, I want to talk to you. 6 years before that, I started thinking in my head, he's going to be reaching out to me. And a lot of my social media content for that 6 years is me laying the foundation and groundwork for him looking for me online and knowing what type of man that I really am. And we've had this big holistic kind of coming back together moment about like making tough decisions. And I think that's one of the things that I think a lot of dads have lost, and lost because that blueprint is so different, is that now you have to make tougher decisions because you have to be able to like act in the best interest of the child, right? Not helicoptering, not trophying. Like my 12-year-old daughter, who knows this whole entire story, I've had her out of school this year, and I'm not looking to cause like havoc here when I say this, but she's been out of school this year 46 days because I take her traveling with me. I take her to my speaking events. I take her to my networking things because it's more important for me in radical acceptance of how my children are going to turn out than it is to keep them in a thing that doesn't serve them well with tools for life. And I think that like it used to be a lot easier to put your kids on these paths, have them go to school, have them go to the college, they're going to get the job at the place, and that is quickly eroding. And so I now live in the space of like taking real radical acceptance for all my choices and being able to build tools and systems for people, myself included, that can then support prosperity and success, and then being like, oh, that part didn't work out, let's learn from it. Because you said an actual very interesting thing that people have said to me in the past. It's a lot healthier for you to fail forward than it is for you to constantly fail
Yeah.
backwards. And the one thing that I've really honed in on, just to like wrap that up, is I coach a lot of men who are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And what's interesting about coaching those men that I've learned over time is I'm not solving 45-year-old the problems of a 45-year-old, a 55-year-old, or 65-year-old. At 45 years old, I want to be conquering your metabolism. I want to be conquering, maybe you need testosterone replacement therapy. Maybe you're in a different stage of your relationship life. Maybe your kids are getting older. Maybe you're thinking about retirement. But I'm seeing more and more 45, 55-year-old guys show up who have the problems of a 25-year-old because they've spent so much time invested in their business and their
Right.
children that they never dealt with some emotional baggage that they are now toting, and they're getting to a stage in life where they don't have the resources, either physically, mentally, or emotionally, to really manage it in a way that they don't just turn into grumpy old men. And it's great that we're all living into our 80s now, but I feel like this is a big challenge that's going to come up, is like, if you got some shit from when you were a kid or from your 20s that's unresolved, it will manifest itself back years later.
I'm smiling because I mean, like, none of us wants to become a grumpy old man. And I was on a
I don't think
plane.
so.
No, I was on a plane last week, and uh, I got my bag down, and then I forgot my water bottle. And I turned around to get it, and this guy was like barreling down, and we're at like the back of the plane, like we're the last people off the damn plane. And I kind of pushed in so he could go by, and he like bumps me on the way out, and I was like, I just got to get my water bottle, and I was like, I don't want to be that guy. Like there's got to be some shared sacrifice. We're all trying to get off this stupid plane together, but like, just let me get my water bottle. That's all I want. Like, we all forget things. Um, you talked about your oldest and your youngest. What about your middle child? What's the history and the relationship like there?
Yeah, that's the tough one, to be honest. And I'm glad that you brought that one up. You know, there was a stage in my life where um, she actively chose to uh, take a break from dad, and so we're going on a couple of years where I don't have direct contact by her choice, um, but I respect it. And one of the things I've learned over the years, which is something that more dads need to talk about, is the amount of influence that you have over your children can be ethically manipulated based on the amount of time that you share with your child and the time that you don't share with your child. Right. So in that old school blueprint where dad went to work in the morning, only came home for dinner, and mowed the lawn on the weekends, and like, you have to realize, like, those old school dads were still only spending like 6 hours a week with their child.
Right.
You might have been called more present, but like, come on, let's be realistic. And so I'm very, very grateful, because at some point when my daughter gets older and wants to come back, just the same way my son had come back, she'll come back. We'll have a conversation about that. But along those lines, um, she plays on an international baseball team. She just finished playing in Tokyo.
Mm.
She's number 2 or number 3 on the boys team in her high school, and she's a thriving child. And I've gotten to a place in my life where, like, I'm building great humans. I've got no ego against like what that means to me, other than I want more great humans
Yeah.
in this planet. And I've realized, like, that's a big piece of my coaching, is I want to lead men into feeling great because of this. Because great people don't kill themselves, right? We have a huge problem with suicide, especially for men. Great men don't hurt children, right? Great men don't create random acts of violence, and great men, like, build versus destroy things. And so, like, that's really been a huge focus of my work, is like focusing people to seek their own greatness because of the side effects of what happens in the rest of the world because of that.
Neal Conlon, great guest on the Company Does podcast. Last question here, and I want to share something as well, because you've been sharing. I didn't talk to my own father for 19 years. For 19 years, we did not talk. And for the past 17 years, he's been back in our lives, and he is the greatest grandfather ever, known as Grampy, in such a part of our family. And, I've always said, it's a bit of a weird phrase that's kind of kept me going. It's like life is long, or it isn't. Life is long, or you end up dead. And so, and when life is long, things do come around. One thing, last question to you though. It's pretty clear that you're a self-directed and inner-directed person, and you think of psychologists talk about outer-directed people for whom they need some sort of external stimuli to get something done, and people who are inner-directed, who sort of are reflective, who analyze themselves, who say, okay, how do I move this forward? How do you help men and fathers who may be less inner directed than perhaps you and I are? How do you help those guys fulfill whatever their full potential is when they may be more subject to sort of external influences than you and I are?
Yeah, I mean, love the question and appreciate the compliment there also. I think there are lots of I maybe it's just a stage of life that I'm at now. It's I've started to realize no matter how the words change, some things never have really changed. And so there's the word pilgrimage. I think there's something to that. I've done a lot of work with understanding indigenous practices, and I've got friends who are anthropologists, and we sit around and talk about some of these things. But it's you don't realize for thousands and thousands of years, men, right, as boys would train for these rites of passage. And then they'd have to go off into the woods, and kill the bear or kill the wolf or whatever it is, and then have to sit on the mountain and meditate and do all these things. And so this big thing is we run some events where we do these kind of pilgrimage weekends. And the big thing really is if you can't go inward and find kind of the answers, it's what I call space. And real quick, I know we're going to wrap up here a second, but just to give you the details of that, it's I think we wake up every day, every morning. You do it, I do it, everyone else does it. The minute our eyes open, in our minds, kind of a bookshelf full of stories kind of just manifest itself. And it's we're this type of we're white, we're black, we're gay, we're straight, we're this type of person, we're in this type of relationship, this is our baggage, this is what we're working on. And I learned this very quickly when I would hop from relationship to relationship early on in my life. And really what we need to learn how to do is create space on your kind of metaphoric bookshelf. So it wasn't until someone called me out on it that I pulled the book on relationships out of my bookshelf and said, I'm not putting anything there, but I'm going to leave some space. And space for imagine that, creating space and not filling your day with time will lead you to the thing that you need to work on. And that's a big piece of the work that we do with people.
Neal Conlon, fantastic talking to you today. Omnis Rising, Press Forward Coaching on Instagram. I am Neal Conlon. I'm not Neal Conlon. He's Neal Conlon, but the handle is I am Neal Conlon. Neal, thank you again for being my guest on the Company of Dads podcast. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, man. Appreciate the time.
Thank you for listening to the Company of Dads podcast. I also want to thank the people who make this podcast and everything else that we do at the Company of Dads possible. Helder Mira, who is our audio producer. Lindsay Decker, who handles all of our social media. Terry Brennan, who's helping us with the newsletter and audience acquisition. Emily Servin, who is our web maestro. And of course, Evan Roosevelt, who is working side by side with me in many of the things that we do here at the Company of Dads. It's a great team, and we're just trying to bring you the best in fatherhood. Remember, the one-stop shop for everything is our newsletter, The Dad. Sign up at thecompanyofdads.com/thedad. Thank you again for listening.